All right, good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see you all. Just have just a few quick housekeeping rules. We're asking for attendees to remain on mute until the Q&A session, which will be immediately after today's presentation. I want to also make mention that this session is recorded. That's indicated in your top left screen. So I want to thank you all for taking the time to stop by. My name is Kyle Tribble, and I serve as Director of Culture and Engagement here at the District's Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. And I want to welcome you to our first Equity in Practice series. So just in hopes of level setting, I just want to give a little background about the Equity in Practice series. Equity in Practice is a series and collection of community learning opportunities hosted by the School District of Philadelphia's Office of DEI and the Equity Coalition in collaboration with community-based organizations that are focused on equity, cultural awareness, and social justice. So pretty much in this series, community-based organizations will highlight their organization services, their resources, their connection to equity, along with best practices that promote equitable action. So overall, the goal of this series is to establish a community of learning between the SDP community and community-based organizations that will promote collective learning and collective action that leads to equitable change throughout the city of Philadelphia, starting with historically marginalized communities and populations. So with that, I want to thank you all for attending our first session today. For today's session, we're excited to welcome Michaela Warwick, Executive Director of Collective Climb. Collective Climb is a Black feminist organization empowering BIPOC teenagers in the West Philadelphia area through three main programs, which include the Restorative Community Project, Youth Advisory Boards, and Collective Kickbacks. Thank you for joining us, Michaela, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Kyle, and thank you all so much for using your lunch breaks to come and listen to this. One thing I definitely want to say is please eat. Please feel free to eat on camera, off camera. It's fine. It doesn't matter. And, take in those nutrients. So I want to start again by just restating my name is Michaela Warwick. I am one of the co-founders and the executive director of Collective Climb. And obviously, I'm passionate about this work because I've seen it grow from, reading different literature and getting inspired by that to watching different people host restorative circles to now we are in a place where we are operating in a full capacity. And so it has really been a joy for this growth to happen. And so I feel today quite happy that I get to be in this space to present about our work. So I have some slides. So I am going to share my screen and get us started with that. And my plan is to talk us through the work that Collective Climb does, talk about what our mission means in practice, and then also to create a Q&A space, which I am really excited to hear any questions or ideas that you all might want to share. All right, so without further ado, Collective Climb is a nonprofit organization working with youth in Philadelphia to empower them and their communities through restorative justice. For us, restorative justice in its purest sense is the idea of creating spaces to heal and not further harm. And we're doing that to build a world where Black joy, security, and freedom can be realized in our communities. I also wanted to jump in a little bit deeper and just explain what we really mean when we say restorative justice, because I'm sure it's a word or phrase that we hear all the time in the spaces of education. And without doing this grammar sharing, we might not be thinking about the same thing. So I do want to ensure we're on the same page. So Collective Climb thinks of restorative justice through a four-pronged approach. And it's not an end state. You don't do step one and get to step four and you're done. It's more so a process. So once you're at step four, you evaluate to see if you need to go back to step one. And it's really more of a circular process. So the number scale's a little off, but we'll work with it for the purposes of this presentation today. So part one is this idea of we all live in a society where punitive practices have been normalized, have been the way that we navigate the world. You do something, you get punished. You exist, you get punished. Whatever it is that, might happen right now, that's a process we've accepted. So we often act in congruence with those societal factors without realizing or asking ourselves, how am I punitive in my day-to-day life? How am I punitive to those that I love? How do I show up in a way that causes harm to my community? And so first step is really beginning to have that self-questioning process and doing it with others and being able to say, we might not want to go with this anymore. So that brings you to step two, which is once you've done that unpacking work, it's then considering what could I do instead? So for us, restorative practices is not something that you do alongside punitive work. It's not you get a punishment and then we have a circle to determine how we're going to punish you. It's instead, how is this circle going to be the place where we meet needs? How is this circle going to be a place where we support this individual to re-enter them back into the community? So it's a new way of going that replaces the older, more punitive approach. And this is for both people and for communities. So these first two are a bit more grassroots, a bit more micro, but then it takes us to parts 3 and 4, which is when we get into that macro societal change. So once we on the ground decide there's a different way, we start planning it, we start thinking about it, we then can hold systems accountable and say, look, you are the system, you have all of this power, you have more reach than I do. These are the things that we want to see. We want to try to be more restorative. And so, can we attempt that? Can we build in structures? Can we disrupt things that are no longer working? So that then collaboratively, the idea is to build new structures that work for the future that we're trying to create. And collective climb kind of got here because obviously, I'm a grown adult here, but there was a time when I was a young Black girl and I would speak in class and I would get my color changed, or I would say something and I would be told I was aggressive. And hearing all of these different things, it started to make me feel like I'm punished for existing. And I know this isn't something that I can relate to alone. I'm sure that there are other people on this call who are like, or I've seen that before too. And so we started with this question of what is it that we're punishing with young people? What instead could we uplift? And it required us to think deeper. So this is a statistic that most people maybe have heard at this point, or many people may have heard, but the United States is 5% of the global population, but we have 25% of the incarcerated population in the world, which is the highest incarceration rate in the world. And when you do more and more digging, you see a lot of these current systems of incarceration or these current systems of punishment come directly out of enslavement. It comes from this idea of, okay, how can we continue to create a system that uplifts, racial supremacy for one group and also benefits them economically? So with that in mind, to me, I was like, with my platform, with the platform of different youth and other people who are involved in our movement, how can we reframe this? Because we don't want to be willing participants in continuing that. So we want to reframe, punishing young people who may be angry, who may be acting grown, and instead saying, you know what, that's powerful. And so I did include a quick quote from Alice Walker's definition of womanism. And this here is an idea of what it would mean to liberate yourself, to liberate others. And to do that, you actually do need to embrace outrageous, audacious, courageous, and willful behavior. And for us, young people in our communities have the potential to do that when it's celebrated and when it's done in a restorative way, as opposed to something that we punish and inadvertently teach them is not appropriate or isn't right. So that's why we got started with our youth activism work as well as our restorative diversion program. So I'm going to take a second to begin talking about who we center and the work that we do. So we, as you can see at the bottom of the screen, we work with BIPOC youth between ages 10 and 21. So our restorative community project, which is the program that we train young people to become practitioners, leans towards teens, but for our diversion program, we work with any young person who has been diverted to us. So it's been as young as 10, young people that have sat in cells at 10 years old for hours and hours and hours, and we bring them into a restorative practice. And what we've learned through that is, regardless of that young age to the older ages that we've worked with, everyone really responds well to this sort of practice. And if you look on the other side, our reach has not been that large in terms of direct impact. And direct impact means enrollment into our programming for sustained periods of time and like individual interactions that we've had. And there's a method to that madness. We could have a program and enroll 50 young people at a time, or we could have a program where we work with 10 young people intently and train them up in a train the trainers model so that they actually are able to, leave with a skill set, but also we get to know them. We get to know their families and we get to bring their families into the programming as well. So that's why our numbers are small, but it's a hill that I'll die on because I'm actually really happy that we have been able to create a space where young people really get to know each other, really get to bond. And the fact is that this intimate encounter, they know it's created specifically for them. But we have done workshops, we've done trainings and community events that have allowed us to reach hundreds of people on a one-off scale. So now I'm going to talk about those programs that I've already mentioned, but I'll provide a little bit more context to them. So as I mentioned earlier with that four-part scale, we divide our programming into both the redressing work, so the undoing existing harms, and then we do the rebuilding for what's to come. So I'll first talk about that redress work. So we put two of our outputs into this category. The first of which are the events and workshops that we do. So we create circles. Everything we do is in a circle with an opening ceremony, a closing ceremony, talking stick, the whole 9 yards, to really bring people into starting to consider, what would it look like if we did this differently? What systems are we recapitulating? What are restorative practices? And we've used these as celebratory events. We've used these as healing circles in the park, which you can see in the image below. And we've been in cafeterias and schools. So the environment, we shift it and make it make sense for what we're going to do. Then the other piece of this redress work is a lot harder to explain. It's our restorative justice diversion program. So Collective Climb actually receives referrals from the district attorney's office for youth who have been arrested. These are youth between 10 and 18 who've been arrested for what could be charged as a felony level offense. And instead of that going through the traditional juvenile justice process, we end up taking it into our community-based process where we work with those youth on a one-to-one basis. So it's one of our facilitators, the youth, and it gradually we bring in their families and we bring in the individual who was harmed by that particular action that that young person did to pursue accountability outside of a framework of punishment. For us, it's about relationship building. For us, it's about finding out what was the need that caused this particular action and how do we connect you to that in a sustainable way. And to date, we've had 27 young people go through the program, and 85% have successfully completed, which means, they were not rearrested, and they also have not, they have their case closed. And now they get to be in the community. They get to stay connected to their schools. And this is, work that we're really passionate about and work that we also would like to expand on a more proactive side of things too. So I'll be getting there later in the presentation as well. So then I alluded to our rebuilding work, rebuilding for the world to come. And these are the spaces where youth activism really get to flourish in our programs. So the Restorative Community Project is our 3-month fellowship in the fall, where we began with a restorative retreat into nature. And if this video will play, it won't. So it's fine, but this is supposed to be a video that shows young people outside in the middle of this camp in the grass, making artwork. And we take them to this to give them a chance to get out of the city. A lot of the young people we work with rarely get out of the city. Some of them have even never left Philly or, the surrounding suburbs. So we give them a chance to go into the middle of Pennsylvania, do a campfire, look at the stars, hike, and really reset. And then when we return to the city, we meet with them weekly to be able to train them in restorative practices so that they can bring that same level of joy, that same level of escapism, that same level of community building that we experience out on that trip back into the spaces that they occupy. And this is a paid program. We'd usually work with cohorts between 8 and 12 in terms of size, just so, again, we prioritize that relationship building. We also have a summer iteration of that, which is more intensive. We do more days a week for 6 weeks. And instead of a retreat, we bring in Black Joy days for our Saturdays. And I do keep saying, things like Black Joy, and things like freedom. And these are things because we work with BIPOC youth. It's not just Black youth that we've worked with historically, but all of the youth that we've worked with have come from experiences, and legacies of colonization that have impacted their communities. So we worked with South Asian youth, we've worked with Latinx youth, and even though we talk about, Blackness and indigeneity, it's still an experience that we're able to have cross-cultural lenses to it, and it really does empower the work. So I just wanted to put that as a preface there as well, to make it clear why these things are important to our ethos. The second program in our rebuild is our Youth Advisory Board. So after young people complete the Restorative Community Project, they're able to join our Youth Advisory Board. And quite frankly, it is another paid fellowship where young people get to direct the future direction of our organization. So it was youth that were, really passionate about us having a diversion program. It's youth that were really passionate about us doing more community events and us coming into schools. So we take these different ideas that they have and we put them into our strategic planning as an organization. So truly, we are doing the work to make sure our organization stays youth-led and youth-driven. At the same time, the youth themselves get like a bucket of money that they have to decide what is it that they're going to do. Last year's group committed to that funding to anti-gentrification efforts in the city, and we're going to have a group coming up in a couple of weeks, and we'll see what they do with the work that they're doing as well. But it is something that changes this particular program based on the contours of that particular group. And it's exciting, and that's why we want to keep it small so it becomes that we get to actually hold these things in high esteem. So now I'm going to transition a little bit from talking about what it is that we do to what it is that we would like to do and why I think it's really exciting to have this meeting with people on this call. I'm not sure everyone who's represented, if you want to put in the chat, like if you're coming from a particular school or coming from a particular office, just so I can see who's represented in the space. But what we're hoping to do as a community-based organization is partner more. So one is we would love, to be able to send out our recruitment timelines for our restorative community project to your schools so that young people from lots of different schools can join. Right now, we've been pretty plugged in with SARE and, Carver, and we always have a great turnout from them. But what about other schools that maybe haven't heard of us yet? We want you to know us. We want you to partner with us so we can have a variety of young people from across the city participating in our programming. But also for workshops. I think it would be really beautiful, to do a one-off thing. We can come into a classroom, we can last year we worked with the workshop school in West Philadelphia, for example. They were doing a unit on gun violence, and we built a special program for them to come in a couple days during the week and help them with their gun violence unit. So if you have these different ideas, we'd love to get creative with you and build something that taps into the activist spirit of the youth who are in your classrooms. But also we can do trainings, what is a circle? If you're in that place and you think your school could benefit from being exposed to that, hey, my email will be in the end of this. So let's stay in communication. And then lastly, something, this is a little vague, assessment of punitive practices, but what it's referring to is perhaps you are realizing within your school or within the policies that your office has put out, there might be some remnants of punitive practices that you want a partner to think through. Hey, collective climb is here. We would love to support in that way. And I also think, on another side of things, it's, as I mentioned, for our diversion program right now, it is very much we get a referral from the DA's office and we work from there. But at the same time, young people are frequently arrested at their schools based on, the referrals that we get. If there was a way to partner with the school earlier, we could start doing restorative practices then to even save the trauma of sitting in a cell for young people, for example. So I'm throwing a lot at you all, but I just want to say an idea can stem from anywhere. So if you have something in your mind, if you send me an email, we can start talking that way too. All right. So this part here, I think we all understand restorative practices to some degree, but I just wanted to pull in a little bit of some research and some major pillars of restorative practices in education. And what that looks like in a school environment is ensuring that we're creating equitable learning environments. So things where all students get to have their needs met, where students come to school and feel like they're part of a family. They spend so many hours of their day and so many years of their young lives there. How does school feel like an environment where they want to be? And lastly, actually addressing conflict and harm through restorative practices. So that's just kind of following up the offerings we'd want to offer as well. So this last part of the presentation is just a couple quick things that we like to do that might be implementable in your office or implementable in your school or staff meetings, whichever vantage point you're coming from. But one thing with Collective Climb, everything we do is a circle. So that means even when we're having a meeting, we do a circle. We'll get our chairs together and we'll start with an opening ceremony. So if this was in person, I probably would have said, I have a talking piece in my bag, but my bag's all the way on the floor. So I'll just use this pen I have on the desk. But I'd have a talking piece and I would, or whoever's starting that meeting, I would start with a prompt to bring us into the space. Frequently I ask, how are you arriving in this space? And we just literally slow down to let everyone share. There's no right, wrong answer, but we actually bring in that vulnerability. So if someone's able to tell us, hey, I had a rough night, I'm tired. I now know going to that meeting, they might not share as much as they would normally, but that's okay. We'll make space for that. Or if the meeting isn't that serious, I might be able to say, how about you get some rest? You can leave a couple minutes early. So really starting with that kind of opening. Sometimes if it's an introductory circle, we'll do an icebreaker, like what's the color of your soul, things like that. It really does help build connections. And then even when we're having the presentation, it takes place in the circle. And lastly, we close just the same way we ended. We know that what we've done is something, since we work with youth, something powerful, something that might change a young person's life. So going back to our lives before we were in that meeting, we want to send each other back into our lives with a closing, feeling complete, not scattered or frantic. And another thing that we do in these circles is we set norms. So a norm that we always stick with is, we want the space to feel warm. We invite vulnerability, excuse me. We love the sharing of wisdom. I might be the one speaking right now, but there's probably another expert or someone who really loves restorative practices in this room who could also share their knowledge here, and that would be invited. And I think also celebration. So, telling someone, hey, I really like X, Y, and Z. Or, I really think your smile today lit my day up. Those are sorts of things we like to really invite. Another quick thing, if you are in a classroom or if you work, with a group of people, we also like to do some grounding activities. Sometimes you're coming from home and it's rough there. Sometimes you're not looking forward to where you have to go after this. So really creating a space to stretch it out or prioritizing a song that we can listen to together, close read together, a deep breath here, a meditation there, something to journal. These little small things help. This one takes a long time to teach, so I'm not going to teach it, but I can share these slides out. But another thing we like to do is create a shared communication system. So I don't know if anyone's ever heard of effective statements, but it's something we teach all of the young people that go through our programming what to do. So sometimes when you are upset about something, part of the reason you're met with energy that can lead to a deeper argument is based on tone, is based on the fact that you came across like you wanted to beef, as opposed to coming across like you want to get to the root cause and solve it. So this particular communication strategy is the idea of first, just repeat what you've noticed. I noticed that when you walked past me, you bumped into me, stepped on my toe, and didn't say, excuse me. It made me feel small and invisible. To need to feel better, I think I would like you to apologize. Would you mind doing that? And instead of saying, you stepped on my toe, what's your problem? Instead, it doesn't put someone in a defensive position. So these are communication strategies we teach. I think it might also be helpful for just students in general to learn them, to be able to practice in the hallways, in their classrooms. I think this is the last quick tip. So I'm, I'm trying to move a little fast. So excuse me. But this quick tip is not so quick either. So I just keep saying quick. But anyway, this is actually how we do a restorative healing circle. So when a harm has been caused by someone, we separate that person and the person who was harmed, and we have the same meeting, a parallel meeting with each of them. So this right here is for the person who's caused harm. We simply ask what happened. We start to ask, how were you affected? How do you think they were affected? What could you do to make things right, to improve this situation? And then we ask the person who was harmed, what happened from your vantage point? What did you feel then? What are you feeling now? What could that person do to showcase to you that this can move forward? We can move beyond. And then we bring them together. And that's how we handle conflict. Sometimes sending someone home for 5 days, it allows it to fester if they don't have the tools to be able to talk through it, and it gets worse. And now the conflict is spread onto social media, and now 10 other people know about the conflict, and it ends up growing what could have been resolved peacefully into something that's a lot bigger, a lot more personalities and feelings are involved. So I just want to drop this here as well. So that was the last one. I'm glad I wasn't telling a fib. So I just want to pause because I've been talking a lot and just give a moment for reflection. So if each of you on this call feel, so inclined to either think privately or write in the chat, what are some ways that you could utilize restorative practices personally? How could you use them in your education practice? And also, what are some things that you're still kind of confused about, or something that this presentation didn't clear up, or something that this presentation muddied even further for you? And I'd love to use this to bring us into Q&A. So I'll leave this slide here for maybe a minute. Actually, let me do something first, and then we'll come back to this. I think a better transition would be me really quickly getting the last two slides out of the way, and then we come back to this. The last two slides are I want to stay connected. So if you want to, take a screenshot of this or take a picture of this, if you'd like to follow us on Instagram or send us an email, visit our website, this is that information. Okay. Or write it down. And then there's one more slide. It's a quick pitch of an event that we have coming up this Saturday with our Youth Advisory Board. So our Youth Advisory Board, excuse me, not our Youth Advisory Board, our Restorative Community Project has been working throughout the fall, and they've gotten their training, but they've also are quite an artistic bunch. So they actually will have their work featured at an art gallery this Saturday from 3 to 5. It's 12 Gates Art Gallery in Old City, and they have been exploring mental health for youth, exploring depression, exploring, different community-based energies and anxieties. And we don't know what it is. It's a lot. So Untitled Conspiracies is really what the umbrella was that they came up with. So if you want to see some youth created art, and their own original thoughts around why they created it, we'd love for you to join us. So that was my quick pitch. Now I'll go back to the reflection to open us for Q&A.
Thank you so much, Michaela. We definitely appreciate the presentation, and definitely, I think I speak for everyone. We appreciate the work that Collective Climb is doing for the Philadelphia community. We thank you for your time and your insight. So as you said, with reflection, feel free, everyone, if you have a question, you have thoughts, feel free to hop off mute and ask Michaela whatever is on your mind.
I'm just reading over the chat as well at this time. Thank you all so much for your kind
I wanted
comments.
to ask a question if I could. So I work with very young youth, right? So ages 3, 4, 5. And then of course, once they get into kindergarten and first, I'm really trying to figure out, have you guys thought about like maybe like a mentoring piece to it to just even start talking to the youth at that very early age?
Mhm.
And we do work as far as how to deal with like social emotional issues and how to deal with your feelings, some of the things that you were kind of talking about. But I'm thinking more like on and this might be later down the line, but like more like a mentoring piece for the younger youth once kids finish like your program in a sense.
Yeah. So Brittany, thank you so much for mentioning that. I think the Youth Advisory Board and things that could come after that presents a really great opportunity for young people who have been trained to then come in and actually, to some degree, they could train younger youth themselves and be the facilitators of that, or they could also just model what a circle is and create those spaces. So I definitely do think there is plenty of, potential collaboration in that way and ways for us to do it. So making a mental note, because we're going to be starting up this new youth advisory board and throwing around a bunch of ideas for what it is that they would like to see this become, and how they can use the knowledge and insights that they have to spread this to more youth in the community. And I think starting there is brilliant because young children at that age, they're more equipped actually to jumpstart into circles, mat time, sitting around and listening to the teacher read them a story and then they share out after. That naturally creates a transition into them being able to continue and seeing the value of a circle. They haven't unlearned that system yet. So I definitely think that's a great idea. Mhm.
Michaela, my name is Leah Brown, and I just want to thank you for what it is that you do as well. And, to Brittany's point, it's funny, I was going to ask you if you do any collaboration. I have a nonprofit that is designed specifically for mentoring people of color and underserved, underrepresented populaces. So that is exactly what I do. And that is my focal point as well, utilizing restorative practice through education and mentorship, and also utilizing peer mentoring. So I was just going to ask you if you had thought of doing any type of collaboration in that area, because that's something I would love to possibly collaborate with you. I work in not just public school, but also in privatized. I do sexuality education, as well as other types of education and consent community, and just bringing forth education. I'm not trying to make a shameless plug, everybody.
Shameless plug away. Say the name of it.
It's called the Water Walkers Foundation, because what it's designed to do is to empower people, those forgotten, those people who have been cast aside by society and people have written off, and to empower them, educate them, and build them up in such a way that when you see them out in the marketplace performing, that they'll be unrecognizable, such that what they achieve will seem as though they have achieved the ability to walk on water, proverbially. So I want them to have been so empowered and so immersed in love, care, kind concern, and non-punitive restorative practices. Because as people of color, that has been placed upon us in so many different ways, right? I say that we're subhuman and superhuman in the same way, biological racism. So punitive is all that we've been taught. And we have, recreated that with our children. So we have to do something different. So in that is education, empowerment, love, compassion. I believe that you can discipline someone without it having to be a punitive expression. I do it for my children. We don't go to work and, my husband and I say, when you get into a fight at work or disagreement, you don't punch each other in the face. You talk it out. You find ways to navigate that in effective ways that will hopefully bring about the maintenance of that particular relationship, even if it's just professional. So we have to teach our children to do this, but they don't have the language.
Mm-hmm.
So when we give them the language, they're able to appropriately navigate situations, even when we're not around. So I love what you're doing. I'd love to be a part of it. And I'll get your information. I have it already, and I'll be in contact with you. So
Perfect. I was going to say, either give me your email or, I hope you copied it, because the work that you do is outstanding. And yes, we can partner, we can collaborate. I see it in you speaking, you may be building something together, but also in our existing restorative circles, we are always looking for mentors to come in and be able to be a part of the village that we're trying to construct for each young person. So, it's one thing when I say it or when one of our facilitators say it, but we have someone else come in and say, you are everything that you need to be. You have so much power within you. You won't fail because we are here. If you rely on us, we'll rely on you. We are a community. We're building together. It means so much. So without a doubt, we will be in contact. Thanks, Leah.
And just one last thing, I'm sorry, I just wanted to say this, just because the population of individuals that I'm working with is initially, Black and brown people, but that's not the only people I work with. I believe that we have to build up everyone. There are people in every community, even in, white communities, people need to be built up. Every human being needs to be built up. And if we can teach each other how to build up each other, we can build community by empowering. I want to work with the Muslim community, the Asian community, the Jewish community. I want to work with everyone, because that's how we affect a lasting change. So it starts with us and we move it out. It goes out. So that's all. I just want to say that.
Thanks, Leah. Beautiful. Any last questions or things of that nature? No worries. If not,
I have a question. But first, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. I'm Ryan, and I'm from the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I'm an equity training specialist. And I was just wondering, what do you love most, or like one of the top things that you appreciate and enjoy most about restorative practices? And also, what is the biggest hurdle or challenge that you encounter when trying to implement something that is different and new for so many people, because we're not socialized to have, encounter conflict in this way?
absolutely. Great questions. And thank you so much, Ryan, also for the work that you do. What I love about this work is that it's people-centered work. And everything that we do, because I mentioned we keep things small, is truly in a by name, by need basis. So yes, we have processes, but at the same time, we are creating new processes with each young person that we work with, because if it doesn't work for them, we're not going to try to force them to fit into what is on a sheet of paper. And instead we're going, excuse me, my voice, but it's going to come back. Okay, yeah, so we're not going to force them to fit what's in a piece of paper, and instead we're going to build something that works for them. And I think what really brings me joy is because of that approach. I feel like my family is huge. Every, young person, everybody that we get to meet, it's not just we have this exchange in a moment of time. It's truly now, don't forget about me. I'm here, and I won't let you forget about me because I'm literally going to be here. And it's really powerful to have a whole bunch of people that I genuinely can say that I care about, that I trust, and that, they've communicated to me same things. I think the most difficult part of this is when you think of people as family, the idea of separation of work and personal life and, your work-life balance, that's out of whack. I will say I have a personal politic of rest being super important. I don't, the old thing, you can't pour out of a glass, you can't pour out of your pitcher if it's empty. You're not putting anything in anyone else's glass. So I definitely do believe restorative justice also has a process for restoration and self-care. And self-care being rest, self-care being making sure I eat enough meals, making sure I go for a walk, making sure I have people to check on me in the same way I'm checking on others. But it gets hard. And I'm not always, successful, but I have people in my corner to remind me, remember what you said about rest, girl. And it's beautiful to have that, but it definitely is hard when, there's a young person and they're in crisis, or there's a young person trying their best, but there are systemic barriers that are preventing them from being able to make a mistake, but try again. And having to do that, sometimes it's hard to go to bed and say, this is a battle I don't want to, this is a battle we can't lose, but it's not resolved tonight, that kind of thing.
Do we have one last question for Michaela? All right, I want to thank you, Michaela and Collective Climb, for your time today. We definitely appreciate it. I encourage everyone on the call to, please be sure to stay up to date with Collective Climb and the great work that they're doing, and stay in touch and collaborate when you can. Before we all depart, I just have a quick update and announcement. As I mentioned before, Equity in Practice is a monthly series. Next month, we will be welcoming the Council on American Islamic Relations, it's also known as CARE Philadelphia. So CARE Philadelphia pretty much serves as a grassroots civil rights and advocacy group promoting justice and mutual understanding. They have a mission of enhancing the understanding of Islam, protect civil rights, promote justice, and empower American Muslims. With the Philadelphia School District having such a growing population of Muslim students and staff, we're asking everyone to join us for that particular presentation with CARE to learn a little bit more about their work with the district, best practices you can use when looking to support your Muslim students, colleagues, and families, which definitely includes the month of Ramadan, which is approaching next month on approximately March 22nd. So I do have the link for the registration for that. I will drop it in the chat. Also be on the lookout for any communication around that as well. We would love to see you there, just to learn a little bit more about CARE and the work that they do. But I want to thank everyone for their time today. Thank Collective Climb, and I hope you all have a great afternoon. Take care, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.